Meeting. First on our agenda is a work session item for murals under the West Franklin Street Railroad overpass.
Hello.
Hi.
This is Matt Wilson. He's with Washington County Public Schools. He's a visual arts curriculum specialist. He and I have been working on the possibility of putting murals under the bridge up on West Franklin Street. So as I understood it, when we met in November and we talked about beautification under the bridges, the direction you gave me was to go the mural route here for Franklin and maybe to Washington Street as well. But for today, we're just talking about Franklin Street, and that would be a student-led initiative that we would do there. So Matt and I have been working together to come up with a plan on how to place murals under the bridge. We've come up with a system, almost like a fencing system that the murals could be attached to. And we would use these 4x8 sheets of hardy, what they call hardy panel, which the students could be, we could take them to the schools, the students could paint them there, they could be brought out to the field and then installed. So the kids don't ever actually have to be standing on a busy street. So I talked to Matt and he contacted a bunch of schools, and you want to tell them about kind of feedback you got?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, immediately the schools that I talked to were very interested. We got a variety of schools that want to work on this project. You know, some right here, kind of Hagerstown located like North and South High, E. Russell Hicks, and then kind of spreading out to like Springfield, Clear Spring, Smithsburg, even Hancock, Middle and High. So about 10 schools will be contributing. It's going to be a variety of situations where maybe an after-school art club would tackle this, all the way to an actual art class and a group of students from within like an Art 2 or Art 3 course will be working on it as well. The theme, we kind of talked about that back and forth a little bit. We decided to kind of basically open that up to whatever school, the school interpretation would be between the students and the teacher working together. So there are some sort of Maryland, Hagerstown kind of based panels, and others have just gone in a more abstract, interesting design as well. We did say that overall we wanted it to be kind of a welcoming, interesting, inviting, colorful panel for sure, and I think they've all achieved that with their kind of their designs. Some are still refining, working on their plans, but overall most of them have basically what they want to do. Students are excited about the opportunity to do this.
So that, coupled with City Light is improving the lighting under the bridges. I'd like to try to get the bridges painted too, if I could. I'll need to work with the railroad on that to clean up the background, what would be behind the murals. But the budget is in the memo. It's consistent with what we talked about last fall. I think we can definitely make that happen. And if you're okay with all this, we could probably get this done by the end of the school year, get everything installed maybe by the end of June or something like that. This is Franklin Street. That's about it.
The 4x8 panels, are they going to be lengthwise or?
Lengthwise.
Lengthwise, okay.
To put them higher, that would be significantly more money for the structure to hold them, and we need a lot more panels.
So are they going to be permanent?
I would
Or do you have an expectation for like how often they would be replaced?
So when they're finished, we will clear coat them like we have the other pieces of art in town. I would, under a bridge like that, I would fully expect them to last 15, 20 years and still not fade and look good. And then at that point, they'd either have to be, periodically, they probably ought to be washed off. But probably replacing it, you're probably looking at 15, 20 years down the road.
And I apologize for not being able to follow it exactly. So it'll be on both sides?
Yes,
And they'll be ground level?
yes. Or slightly elevated from
Yeah.
the sidewalk.
I'm just trying I'm trying to get an idea of their lifespan at ground level. I mean, I'm thinking of, pedestrian traffic, sort of that vehicular traffic through,
Well, we
snow
could-
plowing, that stuff's gonna eat away
So
at the
they'll
bottom.
be 6 feet back from the
Yeah.
curb, so we're starting at the bridge too.
So no snow.
We could elevate them a foot or two and put something underneath of
No,
them.
they're ground level, right?
Under a bridge. The snow is not gonna get through the bridge.
Wait,
I think.
no,
it'd
what
be
I'm
better
saying
if
is
you
you got the
elevate
plow
it.
going down,
plowing
yeah, we got
through.
plow coming down, what's 40 basically.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? It's gonna throw that snow and salt off. It isn't like there's gonna be a barrier. Like, that's my concern is, you know, depending on material, they're gonna wear out. Fairly
You know,
quickly.
we could put the posts in maybe 6 feet high and have something underneath to, for that.
And I understand the idea here is to bring it away from the wall. You know, for both for aesthetic reasons and for occupancy issues. And I think it's, well, we give it a try, but I think it's gonna look, I don't think it's going to look aesthetically as pleasing as if they were sort of mounted, you know, just away from the wall like a, you know, like you would expect a picture to be. Like, I think this whole bringing them out and running them ground level down.
Some of the ideas to take up some
To
of the
achieve the
sidewalk.
purpose of, you know, negating the occupancy is gonna defeat the purpose of that aesthetic value that you're trying to achieve. And that just. my
So
two
maybe we
cents.
could, the sidewalk there is 10 feet wide, and we were putting the panels 6 feet off the curb. We could push them back a little further, like 2 feet off the curb or something like that.
You know, I mean, that'd be my preference. I just think it's gonna look funny. I think it's gonna look temporary, is what it's gonna look like when you get it done. And between that and the weather, I get why, but I think we're gonna defeat the art component of doing it. You know, the function follows the form instead of the other way around.
But we could definitely set them back further and not occupy as much of the sidewalk.
I love the concept, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And interesting to see the different directions that the schools and students have gone.
I don't think. Normally, when a snowplow goes under the bridge like that, are they slinging snow? I don't remember seeing it, you know, pushed way back up in there. At that point,
Feels like they stop, there's no snow.
I mean, they push some into it, and they're, you know, it's slinging snow as it goes under, but I don't think it's gonna pile up against the fence or against the artwork. It's gonna be back 6 feet, so that's a pretty good, he'd have to really be moving.
6 or 7 feet, yeah, we can move it back further.
I personally, I think maybe if they were up a little bit off just the actual ground level from,
Yeah,
you know,
I agree.
just water and wet sidewalk and just sitting there rotting, you know, over time, if they were somehow to get them up a foot high or something.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. We can do that.
The other thing about them lasting, you know, 15 years or something, is this something that we want to have happen more frequently than that? I mean, you know, it's like for a class at North High or South High does a panel, and then 15 years later, we go back and ask, you know, another generation to do another panel. Is this something we want to try to rotate more frequently and have different ideas coming through year by year? You know, even if we only replaced a panel or two every year, if we kind of, you know, once we get it done, we keep rotating so that it's fresh and representative, you know, whatever the themes are too, are possibly more representative of what's going on in town at that time.
Or even every 3 years, so
Yeah.
then
Every class
Yes.
has,
an opportunity.
yeah.
What kind of cost would that be to replace it?
To replace all the panels and the paint would be $5,000.
Like, so every 3 years, it'd be $5,000.
And I don't think that's
I
very
think
hard to
that's-
work into a budget.
I think that's
No,
doable, and I think that would mitigate some of the the problem of, you know, the panels that, if one of them does get some weather or there's a leak in the bridge or something and one panel gets trashed, then that's gonna be the next one to get fixed.
The good thing about hardy panels is they're almost like a cement board. It's not a wood product, so water won't hurt them. But I do agree that we should try to keep them up off the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Mr. Wilson, do you think that that would be something that the students would be interested in to do every, you know, like a new, fresh class? Or do you find that that would be cumbersome in the curriculum that they're
No, I don't think
concentrating
if
on?
you were looking at a period of, like you said, every class or 3 to 4 years, I think that would be a good time frame. I think every year could become a bit cumbersome, maybe to tackle a project like this with the teacher. I mean, I do think it would be the kind of idea where you would want to probably replace all of them, because then whose would you choose to stay and
Yes,
go,
of
and
course.
so on. And then, you know, after 3 or 4 years, if the panels are still in good shape, what would we do with them? You know, at that point, the ones that are being replaced, would they go back to the schools, or would they be put somewhere else in the, you know, I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there.
Right.
I mean,
Some of the other art around town that we talked about replacing, the faces of Hagerstown, we were just gonna give them back to the photographer, so I guess it would be the same here.
they would be returned to the school.
Yeah.
I would imagine it would become more competitive over the years, you know, to the schools get more
You would hope
involved.
so,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? Competitive, or probably not the right word, but more interested, I suppose, to see their
Within
own
that,
work.
There's new opportunities to
Yeah.
be able
Yeah.
to display. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're gonna elevate them at least a foot, set them back as far as we can, and still accomplish the goals here, and then try to rotate them out every 3 years.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Very good.
Thank you.
I'll call you on Monday.
Sounds good.
All right, next we have Mr. Klein with the Vietnam Memorial dedication.
I won't take much of your time. I'm here more or less to invite you all to the dedication for the Vietnam War Veterans Monument on 181 South Walnut Street. We have an address. March 29th at noon time. Actually, if I can get my file.
Perfect.
Here's an invitation.
No, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't get them to you prior to the meeting here, but we were trying to get everything worked out here.
So you still have some work to do next week. You want to tell them what all you have to do yet to finish?
Yes, we have to, actually, our committee went out to Columbus, Ohio a couple weeks ago to actually physically see all the monument pieces. They finally got in. We had some black granite that came international from overseas, so we should have actually probably had this done prior to Veterans Day this past year, but we were held up on the granite and all, so it just came in right around Christmas time. We still got, everything at the site's pretty much ready. The lights have been put in, the pad's ready. We have a entrance archway that's setting out at Smithburg with Pro Fabricators. That'll be installed. One of the key things that we added since we got enough money was we're actually putting 2 bullet cameras on the project itself. So the wiring's there. It's supposed to be hooked up on the 25th of March. Our delivery date is what's scary. It's got me a nervous wreck because we're only allowing a couple days prior to the actual ceremony. So weather permitting, everything is coming up from Columbus, Ohio. It'll come in by a flatbed truck. The only disclaimer we have with getting it delivered would be something unforeseen. And, you know, I can't wait for that to happen, you know, so we're going ahead with the dedication date on the 29th. They've promised us to get it up here, hopefully a couple of days sooner than the 27th, which would be that 2 days before. And as far as the site, back to the site, we have, we're kind of worried about the ground, as saturated as the ground is, you know, to get a crane in there to offload all these pieces and everything. But Rodney told me today that I can get a hold of Mark Haddock with the Parks and Recreation, that they have mats that they could put down. So that took a load off of us. That was one thing we were really concerned would be out of our control, would having a crane come in there and try to set the pieces for us. It's not gonna take them that long to set everything. And at the site, we've added a couple things since our last update when we were here before, I think it was last year. We've added, you know, an entrance archway. We're also adding a couple pieces of fencing right along the street that runs to the city park. And we'll have 2 sections along the fronts and then 1 section going into our brick columns that'll hold the steel archway. Trying to think if there's anything else. I know we were here, May of 2016 is when we first appeared before the mayor and council and asked for a piece of property. And really thank the city for allowing us to put a monument on that piece of property. It's gonna look pretty nice. I think it's gonna really make a lot of people, you know, be in awe of this. It's gonna really look different than any of them we've seen anywhere in the country, you know, in other towns or states and all. And technically, we don't, in Washington County, we don't have a Vietnam Veterans Organization. You have, all your VSOs have last man clubs and they have representatives, but there's no actual group that covers the Vietnam veterans. The Joint Veterans Council, they consist of representatives from all the different VSOs, service organizations. And that's who we went to actually sponsor this project. You know, our initial goal was $150,000. However, when we were here on the 16th of May, back in 2016, our goal was to raise $150,000. We actually didn't start fundraising technically until January 1st of 2017. And by August of 2018, we hit the 150,000 mark, and we've actually went over that. And any monies that's left over, we're probably going to put into a trust fund to take care and maintain, or maybe add a future piece later on. But right now, we're just hoping and praying that this thing comes off on March 29th, and we invite all of you. It's been long overdue. And I think you'll be surprised when you see it. You know, the banner that's been over there is getting pretty ragged out. We're gonna have to get that down, and plus our thermometer, I had a 10-foot thermometer made that's been capped off since August, but it's still there, and it's kind of leaning pretty good from the winds and all, but that's also holds our permit, you know, for the site and all.
Congratulations, I know you've worked really hard,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
tirelessly.
I'll be able to get back to doing what I want to do
Yeah.
now,
Good job.
which is fishing.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, and I am leaving
Congratulations.
Thursday for Knoxville, going down to the World Championship. I'm not fishing, unfortunately.
You deserve that trip.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. I also would like to really give Rodney a big applause, you know. I mean, he's worked with us since the beginning of this, you know. Without his help, we probably wouldn't even come close to getting this thing to fruition. So, Rodney, thank you.
Thanks.
We're lucky to have it.
All right, up next is professional
Still
court, accept the offer of land dedication.
Yeah, so if you go
back in time, 40 years, and the MKS development is just a field, and they platted it out, that professional court, as it runs back, and right now it ends in a cul-de-sac, but the right-of-way for professional court continued to Antietam Creek. So there's a section that shows in your drawing, that's highlighted in yellow, that is beyond the cul-de-sac, but between the creek and the cul-de-sac. So when it was originally platted, that land was offered for dedication to the city, but the city never accepted it because there was no street ever built there. Well, now that the project's moving forward with the extension of Professional Boulevard and the construction of the bridge, the county asked us if we could go ahead and accept that piece of land so that we would have control of that piece of land for them to be able to extend the road and build the bridge. So what we're asking you to do on March 26th is to basically pass a resolution that accepts that offer, and then a deed of acceptance will be signed by the parties involved, and we would have control of that land. The other thing in the resolution is that I'm asking for your specific approval to issue a permit to Washington County to connect to the end of the cul-de-sac, because we do have to issue a permit for that. I just want to make sure that everyone here is on board with that whenever they get ready to do that.
I'm okay with it.
Yep.
Thank you.
I noticed it said that there may be some disposition of the cul-de-sac itself later on. That's going to just basically disappear?
Right, because the road right will go through, but the cul-de-sac loops around. So that area that is no longer needed for public use will revert back to those property owners. That's the way the deeds were actually set up for that.
Okay.
I think this body will have to pass something, probably an ordinance in the future to dispose of that as public land. But it'll go to the private properties and go back to the tax rolls.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you. All right, Amanda, Keep America Beautiful affiliation.
Good afternoon. So I'm here because we have a new state of Maryland requirement of maintaining the Main Street designation, that the municipality become an affiliate of Keep America Beautiful. So I'm seeking support for the city's application to that organization. Keep America Beautiful works to end littering, improve recycling, and beautify communities. And the city already does some of the elements of the program, and this affiliation would just help to enhance those elements, particularly in collecting statistics and reporting on those statistics, such as miles of streets cleaned and acres of parks cleaned, number of trees planted, et cetera. So the mayor and council are in support. Then we'll prepare a motion resolution at the regular session. Any questions on the program?
And the fee is what, $1,000?
It's $1,000 to apply. It includes the 1 year $220 annual fee, and that covers a trainer that will come to our community in the fall to work through some of the items that we gather over the summer.
We'll go with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, up next we have Michelle Hepburn and Jennifer Peterson. Everyone's favorite topic, the 2019 non-taxable bond issuance.
At least it's not budget. Yeah. That's not the big word. Yes. Good afternoon. I say at least it's not budget. Jennifer and I have been sitting up there writing for the past couple days thinking, man, this is a long book. So we're glad to be here to talk about a different subject, actually, I think. So we are here to talk about a bond issue, and we included some information in the packet. We attached a couple of pages that were in the fiscal year 19 approved budget. But realistically, I have had a number of department managers throughout the year remind me that they are waiting on the funding sources for several of their projects. One of which, Pangborn, I'll pick on Rodney, although he doesn't typically remind me, but Pangborn, he did a presentation, I want to say, back in September and October, and this body said, yes, please move forward with that project. And then I come behind and say to Rodney, oh, but that $1 million is bond financing, and we're not issuing a new bond yet, so you have to wait. So he's been patiently waiting. We have a number of things that are ready to go, project-wise, that were included in the fiscal year 19 budget, but we have a large number of things that are not, that were higher dollar. So right now, what I did was I took a step back, of course, since we have an interim city administrator right now, and because there's some current changes that are occurring with our financial consultants, we have asked the question, is it beneficial for us to do an entire governmental bond issue, public sale, which typically is larger dollar, they're tax exempt, or do a private placement? A private placement just simply means we go through the same processes, except for it's a shorter period of time. We still utilize financial advisor and bond counsel. We still need ordinances and resolutions approved by this elected body. But typically for a private placement, it's smaller dollars. You don't want to do a private placement. If you get to 5 million, nobody's going to be interested in doing it. And then typically, if it's under 2 million, not many are interested. In a private placement, the financial investment market actually drives most of it. And when I say drives most of it, when we do a typical GO bond issue, we say things like, we're looking for a 20-year term, what we're looking for in a way of refunding options and when things are due. With private placement, realistically, right now, we're looking anywhere from a 10 to a 15-year time period, and those financial investors that are willing to loan us this money would dictate and determine that amount. The good news is that when we did both the fiscal year 19 budget and when we're looking at doing the fiscal year 20 budget, the amount that we're estimating that we would have in annual debt service requirements for these projects have already been included. Again, because the majority of these projects were already in your budget that we approved last May. So with the blessing of the body, I would like at the end of March to start and bring forth the introduction of the ordinance to move forward, as well as a declaration of official intent. It's just another article that we need to do in the event that we move forward with any projects, two specific ones, or spend any dollars before we go to bond closing, that we would still be able to use bond monies to reimburse ourselves for. The projects in question, there's only a handful. First and foremost is in the fire department, and Chief could not be here this evening or this afternoon. He had prior commitments, but realistically looking to go ahead and do 2 engines. And we had completed an RFP probably 18 months ago and had committed over a 7-year period to purchase 5 engines and pumpers so that we would get a better pricing. We've already done 1 under that agreement. We had 1 in fiscal year 19 budget, and we had another one in fiscal year 20 budget. Timing-wise, realistically, even if we place the order today, we're not going to get them into fiscal year 20. So looking for permission to include 2 of the pumpers. So instead of $709,000, looking at about $1.3 million. And that amount will allow us to secure the pumpers, but also to outfit the pumpers. In the past, we were often a little shy when it came to that in our bond financing sources. Another item is in Public Works for some much-needed dump trucks. And one of the things that we looked at doing, in the original budget, we had included a higher dollar amount. We looked at the typical dump trucks like we currently have in our fleet for snow removal and such. And Eric and his group have come back and offered a different option so that we would be able to go ahead and move forward with purchasing 2, but not needing as much money. Police radios, typically radios would never be included in a bond issue. It's tax exempt. We have a guarantee from the county that, and the manufacturer, that this specific radio would have a 10-year life or a 10-year warranty. But all of the existing Motorola's they're not continuing to make them. We can't get parts for them. So this is actually looking at giving radios to the entire HPD. We already had secured and purchased 12 earlier in fiscal year 19 with other monies, but this would purchase approximately another 105. And then later in calendar 2019 and in fiscal year 20, we need to do the same thing for the fire department on the radio side. The next is the Hagerstown Cultural Trail. I'm recommending including $50,000 in bond money. And this is funding to help towards acquisition and possibly demolition or other things that we would need. This group we're already looking at the option of a purchase of land, and so timing-wise, it was important for me to make sure we had that added at this point. Parks is in desperate need of a loader. We had $60,000 in the budget, but we had some other funding sources that will help offset that. So even though the cost of the loader itself is going to be like $64,000, we have enough funding elsewhere to cover the difference. So we're only borrowing exactly what we need. And then last but not least is the Pangborn Lake Restoration, $4 million. So really asking to move forward with $3.1 million in bond. Again, it would be through private placement, so it's still with the full faith and credit backing of the city. Our financial advisor would be primary, helping us to get a calendar and a schedule together. The goal would be to go to closing, just means having our money in place by July 1. We can move forward with the projects before then, as long as we are moving and the bond actually does close. Our financial advisor is Public Advisory Consultants, and we would still working with Funk and Bolton, which is Lindsay Rader specifically for our bond counsel. And this would be tax exempt, sorry, not taxable. The difference right now between a private placement and the GO bond market, again, just depends on the number of years that the banks are willing to go, 10, 12, 15 years, maybe 50 basis points, so we're talking 0.5% difference. But again, we have the monies within our fiscal year 19 approved budget and within what we're proposing for fiscal year 20. And even if we move forward with this, there's still a possibility that we would come back before the end of calendar 2019 if all these other projects are ready to go. And we have a couple of things on the utility side as well that really needs bond monies, but again, looking to move some of these things forward and not continue to defer and wait until fiscal year 20. Any questions or comments on the specific projects?
You mentioned that the fire department was going to need new radios as well. When are those supposed to come online? Is that fiscal 20 also?
Hopefully, yes. And
Right.
theirs would be slightly more than this. They were originally estimating to need about a little over $800,000 for theirs. So when I approached fire chief to say, what is most pressing? Because if we have all radios on here and don't have things that are going to be longer than a 10-year life, then nobody's going to loan us. We're not going to go beyond a 10-year. And he said to me, first preference is these pumpers, because he still had some things he wanted to make sure was in place first.
So there's no advantage to lumping that into this bond issue?
Actually, the price on the radios, the county did a collective RFP, so all of that pricing was already included for the county, DES, city public safety group. So all of that was considered at the time that it was done. So we would actually secure these via Washington County.
Okay.
I don't have any questions, Michelle.
Good.
Okay. So then if that's the case, we'll come back at the end of March. We'll go ahead and have it in the preliminary declaration of official intent, as well as introduction of ordinance for the bonds, and then maybe add a special session that following week in April. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Appalachian Regional Commission funding request. Kathy Marr and Megan Flick.
Good afternoon. So we are here to present the ARC funding request for fiscal year 2020. Just a little background on the process first. The Tri-County Council of Western Maryland is seeking local project funding requests to the Appalachian Regional Commission, or ARC, for fiscal year 2020. And then our deadline this year for submission of preliminary project descriptions to the county is April 4th. The county commissioners from there will prioritize all the requests submitted within the county and will forward the request with their recommendations to the Tri-County Council for review and action. So the chart in your memo details all the projects that staff recommends the city rank and submit for consideration for ARC funding in fiscal year 2020. The first is professional court widening, and we're actually going to call this professional court widening phase 2 to differentiate from our request last year, which was for $500,000, and that's still pending. And this year we're planning on asking for $750,000 for a total project cost of $2.5 million. The next project is the Life Safety Code Upgrades Fund. We're going to try for this one again, asking $250,000 and matching $250,000 for a total project cost of $500,000. The third project is wastewater collection system rehabilitation to correct inflow and infiltration from entering the city's wastewater system. We're planning on asking for $200,000 and matching $200,000 for a total project cost of $400,000. And the final project is a third parking deck to provide more parking downtown in the form of a 4-level parking deck with approximately 493 spaces. We're estimating that project cost would be around $9 million, and so if we were to ask for $1 million, we would match around $8 million or whatever was remaining. And then I also mentioned in the memo the consistency that all the projects have with the ARC program goals and objectives, and then also the financial impact if we are awarded grants for each of those projects. So we're just asking that you rank them so that when we forward the request to the county, they'll have an idea of our priorities and can use that when they rank them and forward them to the Tri-County Council.
Or if you do not agree with any of them, they can be removed.
Is the professional court widening request, is that in addition to any request that the county is making, or is this in concert with what the county would be requesting?
They're requesting for the bridge and the part on the other side of the bridge. This would be in conjunction with, but separate for the part that the city's responsible for widening.
And the reason we called it phase 2 was just based on recommendation. So because we asked for money last year, we want to differentiate from that project so that it's clear it's a different phase of the project that we're asking for funding for.
So we're still waiting for the $500,000 for the first part. We're asking for $750 to add on to that. Is the reason for that the necessity that we sort of need the whole chunk of money to make the project happen? Or at least our portion of it?
Reduce the amount that the city would have to kick in.
I mean, would we still have to kick in the column that says local and non-federal match? Would that be the city's responsibility then?
Actually, for local access roads, there's not a match required, but we just provide that because we figure we'll be providing a local match anyway. Even though for that type of project, it's actually not required by ARC to give up to 50% match.
Our share of the costs for the widening of professional court and the improvements that need made to Eastern Boulevard is $2.5 million. Okay. So we asked for 500 before, and we're asking for another 50 to get us 50% of the funding from ARC. That's the goal here.
Okay.
Hopefully we'll hear soon about last year's request. They were still clarifying some of the information in our application just this week.
And I'm fine with all 4. I don't really see number 3, like, that one seems a little odd to me. ARC I always see as sort of economic investment fund, and number 3 seems like a city maintenance item that in the grand scheme of 80,000 customers, you could roll into a rate adjustment and never miss. I just, you know, it's pennies on the dollar of what we pay for water and sewer operations. You could always make an adjustment and, you know, no one would ever miss the 10-cent adjustment that it would be the average bill, you know, per quarter to cover something like that.
One of the big priorities for ARC is also critical infrastructure, so that then it's possible to do economic development or to improve the lives of your citizens.
So if we ask for an item on here and we get it, then we're committed to it? I mean, I was specifically talking about the fourth one, the $8 million local funding. Where is that coming from?
I mean, ultimately, you'd have to award a contract to build it, just like professional court, because that's more imminent. You're gonna have to award a contract there, so that would be the final say. I suppose we could get the money from ARC and then turn down the contract and not move forward. That's probably not what we wanna do, but you could do that.
And there's a good chance it would take a little while for a proposal from us for this to have to be in the hopper a little while before it would float up and be a priority for Tri-County Council and county commissioners.
It's like the first of a number of attempts of ask.
Yeah, in the past, there have been leftover funds that they've come to us requesting, can you get this project moving forward to use up these funds? So there are individuals out there that do not utilize what they've been granted.
It's a hard program to use.
It
It's
is.
federal money.
It is.
It's got tons of red tape. The nice thing about professional court is everything's been set up to use
Yeah,
federal money
I
for it.
can see that one. I'm just,
I mean, $8 million is a lot of money, so.
yeah.
And I'm like, well, we're worried about a pumper just a little while ago, so, I don't know.
But we have it in our long-term
Yeah.
CIP.
I understand.
We also just made a third parking deck one of our goals back in November.
Well, $1 million would pay for the design and purchase of some of the land. So that wouldn't even really start the deck. So that would be a good investment, just to have the design and the acquisition of the property started.
To still maybe get private, like we had talked about before, private funding, like as an incentive almost. I'm okay with
Yeah.
the list and the order.
I didn't intentionally make them in any order.
Oh. I do like the order, though.
Okay.
I think professional court widening is, a top
Yeah,
priority.
that's gotta be.
I mean, I'm a little torn between professional court and life safety being, one or two, but I think that, I like the order that it's in,
I would move the parking deck up to third.
except that,
Okay.
yeah. And then wastewater at fourth,
Wastewater's too.
yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Good.
All right, Kathy Marr and Steve Buckmiller, follow-up on 2018 land management code.
And we also have the chairman of the planning commission with us, Doug, right?
All right. Good afternoon.
I'm sure. We can get going without him.
A little early.
I don't want to lose our
Doug,
slot.
you sit up here? Come sit next to me.
You sit there, you'll have to run for office.
Yep, feel free.
All right, it's been a little while, but back in late November, we had the public hearing on the 2018 Land Management Code package of amendments. In December, we had that discussion on the package and the input that was received at the hearing, and the council remanded back several items for the planning commission to further consider and then come back with a recommendation. And so we're back today with the results of that further consideration of remanded items. And so in the memo that's in the packet, I spelled out it's about 6 items that as a result of the hearing and the discussion in December. And I've spelled out for you the input that had been received that the planning commission considered in their meetings, and then the planning commission's recommendation. The first item, and we have Mr. Buckmiller.
Welcome.
5:45 came a little early.
It did.
So the first item was the rooming houses issue. During the public input, there was some opposition expressed to the requirement to have 24-hour on-site supervision for the rooming houses. Also, the special exception requirement for larger facilities in the CG. As proposed, you could have up to a 16 rooming unit facility in a number of zoning districts without the Board of Zoning Appeals, but in the commercial general zoning district, we're saying they could be larger, but you'd have to get a special exception from the Board of Zoning Appeals to go above the 16.
Can you define some
some.
You said some opposition. We talking 50 people, 5 people, 1 person?
We had, during the hearing, a gentleman who was hoping that perhaps part of his hotel could become a rooming house didn't want to have to deal with the 24-hour on-site supervision. There was some concern expressed by city council members about that issue, the special exception, and the parking requirement. And so those were the 3 items that the planning commission reviewed, and they felt after their deliberation that the 24-hour on-site supervision should still be retained for the larger rooming houses, the ones that are over 16, but they could see waiving that requirement for the small facilities. But for the ones where if you're proposing to go into the commercial general zoning district and do a pretty substantial rooming house unit, that it would make sense to have the Board of Zoning Appeals review that, give people a chance to come out and express whatever concerns they have, let the BZA deliberate on that. So the planning commission suggests, okay, do away with it for the under 16, or the 16 and under, but still keep it for the over 16, and still keep the special exception for the commercial general zone. And then also retain the off-street parking requirement, because some neighborhoods have a lot of challenge providing off-street parking, and if you put in a 16-unit facility in the middle of the neighborhood and they all have cars, you could be creating a big issue if everybody's fighting on the street for the parking.
And can you also define what supervision means?
That there would be someone, sort of like a concierge at a hotel, that there's someone there all the time in case issues arise, then they can manage the issue.
So let's say you've got a 50-unit place, and you say, look, you gotta have somebody on duty. Do we know what that means? Like, is that, I mean, are we talking about an individual that's like a super, or are we talking about an individual with, specific, I don't know, qualifications for the specific, operation of the rooming house? In other words, let's take Holly Place, let's say, okay, you know what, Holly Place, because of the clientele, you need to have an RN on there full-time. I don't know what but then you have, let's say you have a rooming house that says, I got 20 units that it's an addiction, rehab, type of living arrangement.
This is not addiction, or this is just rooming.
And that's what I'm trying to figure out, what we mean by rooming.
We address those elsewhere.
Supervisor.
We address facilities like that elsewhere. We're
Yeah,
talking.
This is just anyone who would,
Just room.
for whatever reason, would prefer to just be renting a single room
Right.
as their dwelling, not because they need
So
medical care.
What does supervision mean? That's what I'm trying to figure out is, could it be just somebody,
A representative of the owner.
Yeah.
so it could be somebody that lives there?
That's right, representative of the owner. The place is not going amok without at least somebody knowing about it, who has to report to somebody who has to take care of it.
Like any kind of utility problems or water leaks, things like that.
What were we going to do before this? For the rooming house?
The way it was proposed was that you'd have 24-hour on-site supervision for any rooming house, no matter what size.
It's not possible.
But for cost purposes, I mean, if you're gonna pay someone to do that, it becomes costly,
For
so.
16 rooms, might be a hazard or a problem.
But if you're gonna have a substantial number in a former hotel out in the CG zoning district, it seems like there should be someone on hand just to help make sure things are running smoothly. Or if things start to go wrong, a resident has some person to go to say, hey, we need a problem solved. Instead of just having to leave a message on somebody's voicemail somewhere and wait till they hear from somebody.
The example I go back to is, back when the Y was downtown, there were rooming houses upstairs. Bud Otis lived in one of those rooms, while he was getting Review and Harrow built. I mean, it was a place for him to reside, sleep, and be able to go to work and not have to drive or commute or buy something more expensive to live in an apartment or anything else. And he could leave when he wasn't using it. So there are needs for those types of facilities, we feel, and in fact, it's demonstrated by some of the recent concerns we've had in some of the hotels that have gotten a little out of hand in the past. So we're trying to address that problem, give something that will provide a facility for these folks. They don't want it to be Bud Osa's, but they certainly could be somebody who's running a crane down here for a couple of days, or something along those lines. And they would come and they would go.
Yeah, some of the rent, you don't
I
have to
think
sign up
that's
for utilities.
optimistic.
One of the
I mean, I
benefits,
do, I think that's optimistic.
one of the benefits of a rooming house is you don't have to sign up for utilities, they're already there. So you don't have to put down a deposit for the utilities, you don't have to put down a deposit for the room, well, at least
I
I don't
think the
think.
little one that we got the report, I don't know where the chief, fire and police chief, either reported the one out in the north end where it was only like there was only 4 people in the unit, and, one person tries to burn the place down. I'm just trying to figure out what we're trying to accommodate here.
I think I described that. That's trying to meet a need for some housing elements in the community in a structured way.
And partially it's addressing essentially a hole in our ordinance. For years, we have not permitted rooming houses as a use within our zoning code. And I believe if we are challenged on that in the courts, we would lose, because it's a valid legal type of use. Zoning ordinance should be accommodating something like that. So then the question became, how do we accommodate it? And that's what you have in front of you, which the research for was led by Kathy.
I think it's very clear it's a need in this area. I know we're having that presentation by some nonprofits in the next week or two, but
I think the more you provide it, sure, the more it'll be a need. The more you provide it, the more it'll be a need. I mean, I don't disagree with that at all. The bigger you make the accommodation, the bigger the need will
But we're
be apparent.
requiring, someone on site, which is a new provision, so it isn't just willy-nilly for rooms, for rooming houses that are 16 and over.
Yeah, I
So we are, so then there's like supervision for that, and
I don't know what that means. I don't know what that term supervision means.
right now,
I hear it, but
right now, if there's 3 people in if there's 15 people in a house and one person starts to set the place on fire, like you referred to, then there's someone there on site. If there isn't someone there on site, then they could be calling a phone number that goes to nowhere.
yeah,
So,
Well,
are they paid or? That's what I'm trying to figure out what this means.
They're representing the owner.
I think that's at the owner's discretion. I would expect to be paid.
Or perhaps if you live there, you
Or
get
yeah.
room and board.
Right.
Yeah.
I still don't agree with the off-street parking, but I think I'm odd man out there.
We've struggled with, this city struggled with years for off-street, getting enough parking, particularly in the downtown core. We do not want to reverse that order and start putting more cars parked on the streets. I mean, I think that we need to continue to monitor that and be sure that there is adequate parking, not people not having to fight like, say, in Fells Point or Federal Hill in Baltimore, literally, basically fights over parking spaces.
I think that just eliminates the majority of places that could be a rooming house.
Might be.
I
And
don't think
that
that's
might
a bad
address
thing.
Kristen's concerns.
I mean, I look at some of these houses, let's just take Oak Hill or what's the street, the dead-end street in the south end here where there's a huge place, you can see it from the overpass. We looked at that at one point and that doesn't have the parking to accommodate, but it's on this sort of like dead-end street that.
Then it can't be done.
Yeah, every other homeowner living there wouldn't want to say, oh, great, I'm glad this big building's now occupied by 30 people in this little
And
side street.
I don't have a place when I come home at 8 o'clock at night
Yeah.
from work to park. So, some of these things will control other things, but we're
Right,
trying
we're
to
legislating our way
provide
out of accommodating.
a housing structure for those people in that economic bracket.
We are, but we aren't.
We are where we are.
I mean, I think of some of the houses in some of the neighborhoods and I don't know how you're able to continue to market some of these houses in the neighborhoods to folks you want to buy and own them, that would then buy and own next to a place and say, oh, I'm glad this 4,500 square foot house got chopped into a 16-unit, rooming house, and that's what I've bought next to. I mean,
There's only 4 zones where it's being proposed. The RH, which is the high-density residential zone, the RO, which is the residential office zone, which is North Potomac Street, South Potomac Street, a couple of other locations, and then the CCMU outside the smart growth A&E district area, and then the CG.
So all of Oak Hill is off the plate, because that's all our mod.
Okay, North Potomac.
And a big chunk of the south end is also our mod, so. And this provision was not written in such a way where the expectation was just about any property in the city or in the zoning districts, for that matter, would qualify. The idea is to make the opportunity available within the district for properties that may fit certain parameters, but not to have a situation where literally any or 98% of the properties in the city would qualify.
And there are a number of properties, it's more unusual not to have off-street parking capability in the RH and the RO. It's more frequent that there is, that they're off of an alley, particularly on the east side of North Potomac Street, very deep yards with alley access. So there would be plenty of opportunities to be able to provide off-street parking. It's more uncommon if the alley is blocked because of some giant garage structure.
Okay, let's take the one on the corner down here, the Bester House, where the attorneys used to occupy. That, you're saying that could be an eligible property?
What's the
That-
zoning?
Is that, I think that might be RH.
That's our,
RO.
it's RH.
And they do have a parking lot.
For like 3 cars.
Yeah, it's about 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've used it,
Wow.
at going to meetings there, it's about 10.
But that's a place that could accommodate that use.
In theory.
So that was one of the remanded items. I don't know if you want to
So I
put
just,
these entirely to bed before you move on to the next ones, or how you want to handle this.
so I just want to understand when it says 24-hour on-site supervision, does that mean that a person has to be there 24 hours? Does that mean that supervisor has to be on site 24 hours a day?
That's the idea.
So you'd have to basically employ somebody around the clock, or designate that person around the clock. Your 8-hour shift is this, your 8-hour shift is, et cetera. Okay.
Is there a need to define that word supervision? Like, what do we expect of that supervisor to do?
If
Or-
you all feel that's important, well, we can add that to the definitions of the land management code.
I just don't want
Yeah,
it to
I
be
don't-
like, hey, this is my person I'm designating, and they're my 24-hour person, you know what I mean? And then you call and that person's like, yeah,
There's always gonna be,
not
there's gonna
around,
be
not around,
problems.
not around.
In everything we propose, and everything is done, and everything's already been posed, and everything's been enacted, those fine points are always gonna be, that's why we have a zoning administrator, to be able to, when he hears about them, he tries to solve them, and tries to bring things back into compliance. We can't put in black and white something to cover every possible scenario.
Short of a definition being placed in the ordinance that specifically spells it out, if I was called to interpret that term, it would be basically like Kathy described, the concierge situation. Somebody's essentially a house manager, taking care of things as they come up.
Yeah. I know, I'm just trying to understand. I mean, when you go to a hotel, there's somebody, at the front desk at all times. That's how it works. I'm just trying to envision if that's what we're talking about here.
Somebody in a room somewhere in that building who's available to address problems.
But as this is written now, though, that doesn't apply in the RO or the CCMU, or it's only in the CG.
It's only
Ones with the large facilities.
16 and under doesn't apply.
Right,
Above 16,
and the only place you could have above 16 is in the CG.
Okay.
Should we move on to the second item? I mean, if we need another work session to finally determine how you want to handle these, we could do that. I don't know how much time you want to spend this evening on this, but we would like to at least be able to get you through the whole list, so you know what the planning commission's recommendation was. The next one was group homes. There was a suggestion from one of the providers who was providing input on this to tweak the language regarding licensing, because not all facilities or providers are licensed, some are certified, some situations it's more a case of being approved. And so the proposed change is to modify the definition for group home, halfway house, and alternative living unit to require the unit be licensed, certified, or approved by a federal, state, or local government agency, so adding in federal and state, and also adding in certified and approved. Or the unit is administered by a provider who is licensed, certified, or approved by a government agency. In some cases, the unit itself is the certified or whatever entity. Sometimes it's just the provider. Speaking with the head of the ARC, it tends to be they themselves as the provider are the certified or licensed entity, not each house that they have out in the county. And so this seemed to cover everything, particularly those that are under the oversight of a government entity. So that's the recommendation for that. The third one is the change that would require every dwelling unit to be on its own lot, which is a change from the current way the ordinance works. There was concern from the Housing Authority and from some developers what the impact would be from the Housing Authority on the affordability of their developments, from developers on just how you would be able to get bank financing for a multifamily project where every multifamily building is on its own lot, could be sold off. How does the bank have any kind of comfort level in terms of the mortgage or whatever? So the Planning Commission took all that into consideration, and they recommend removing the multifamily from that requirement, but leaving all other types of housing units having to be on their own lot, which makes it possible for home ownership.
So would that change affect the proposed Hagerstown Housing Authority?
Provided
Development.
that they start that project before this change goes into effect, the current project they have in the planning process would be sort of grandfathered in under the old rules. If they do not have it substantially underway, then they would have to re-subdivide, modify it so that each one of these townhouse-style units is on its own lot.
So all of their future plans would have to be adjusted.
When they come in for redeveloping Nolan Village,
Right.
they are going to have to redesign based differently than the concepts that we've seen to this point because of this requirement. Every house is going to have to be on its own lot. Each lot has to front on a public street. So the configurations, and we've seen a couple of iterations over the last several years of what may happen down there. This is going to basically send them back to the drawing board for Nolan Village.
Unless they design it as multifamily, because that Nolan Village is zoned RH, so
That's correct.
apartments are permitted there. They're not permitted out at the McCleary Hill tract.
I don't think this far along into that project that is very fair to do to them. I just think, Nolan Village is a mess right now, and I know that was a highly controversial project either way, but it's happening, it's going to happen, and we've already been through the whole we can't stop it. That redeveloping Nolan, going from what's there now that's not ADA accessible when it's, large elderly population and the housing, they need redone, going to something that is substantially better that would improve that neighborhood and all the surrounding neighborhood around it. I think sending them back to the drawing board just sets a horrible precedent for us.
Well, for Nolan, if we're talking about Nolan
We're
Village,
talking about two different things.
yeah.
So differentiate between McCleary Hill
I know that-
and Nolan Village. McCleary Hill is good to go.
Phase one.
Actually, we expect to have both of the section plats for McCleary Hill out on the edge of town, in front of the Planning Commission for approval on the 27th of this month.
When McCleary Hill got approved, I mean, it got approved in a zone that permits townhouses, not multifamily. But these townhouses were designed in a manner, I mean, maybe I'm off the wall, but when I hear the term townhouse, townhouse is an individual lot that you have the ability to sell. So McCleary Hill was approved as a townhouse development with a multifamily designation. Multifamily is not townhouse.
And that is actually one of the reasons for the proposal that we have here to address your concern.
So when new Nolan gets built, they'll have to build, they can build exactly the way they want to build, they just have to subdivide the lots. They can own every one of those lots. They're still gonna get their $10 on the 100 tax pilot, you know, and pay a fraction of the tax rate, but they'll be able to own every one of them, build it the same exact way, they just gotta put them on individual lots. And I, for the life of me, don't understand, you know, if part of the impetus is the promotion of folks to home ownership over time, why you wouldn't make that a requirement, even for the housing authority, and give them the capacity and capability to say, you know what, if you do something else somewhere else, and you wanna sell these off, we've already made it easy for you. They're already subdivided, they're already built that way.
The planning
and they
commission
can be
agrees.
sold.
We talked
We
about
agree
that.
with you.
Yes.
And this is why we're going in this direction. We are saying that in the future, all of them have to be on their own lots. That means the developer in Nolan Village is not only gonna have to be sure that there's city road frontage for every unit, and that's an expense, but they're also gonna have to run water to every unit, because now they run water to big blocks. Each house has to have their own meter, that's city ordinances. So this will have a drastic impact on the housing authority, but we agree with you. It should be that way, and this does help promote in the future home ownership. The only exception we carved out of that is multifamily apartment buildings, essentially.
Right.
Where you can't do property lines. So, or a cluster of apartment buildings.
Like the
So we're
quadruplexes.
agreeing with you, and this is where we're going, and this is what we're proposing to go.
And they can decide to build something other than a townhouse design and do something different.
Where they could design to go ahead and go the way, you know, of individual lots and individual water lines, individual water meters, city road frontage on every single one.
In that zoning district, they will have options because it's RH zoning, it's apartment zoning essentially,
Right.
so.
So they can build quadruplexes
If they choose.
if they chose and not have to subdivide them.
Right.
That's right.
And it would be but when you build a townhouse style development, you should be dividing them in some manner. You can own every single one of them, but you're still designing it in that manner so that if the opportunity arises to sell, the capability's there. But McCleary's sort of in. They're, I mean, I don't have any expectation at this point that anybody's gonna go back on what they've designed and gotten approval for.
There's a legal problem there.
Yeah, the advice that we've gotten from council is that they have to have their plans in place and substantial ground broken. But I think we really run certain risks if we are perceived as trying to jam through amendments at the 11th hour to stand in the way of that project. My viewpoint is it should be allowed to move. I mean,
Yeah.
they're this close. It sounds like we're
And
not hearing any objection from
And
this
we've kept
body.
them aware of this process so they know what they need to be shooting for. Get your grading permit in
Yeah.
before this is effective.
And
If you try to
there's,
jam it up now, you'd be no better than the county and state that, you know, tried to do it after their funding was approved.
and as a general policy, I would recommend that this body not do that because one of the things that we have as a benefit in our process is we have a reputation of working with developers and having a predictable process. And I would advise the city not to put itself in a position where there's a perception being developed that we're gonna cram through an amendment if we have some sort of development that happens to fly under a radar of some regulation that we didn't foresee. We can fix the regulation but the projects should be able to process under the ordinances that are in effect when they submit. So I would have, as your zoning administrator, I would advise us not to do anything like that. And it doesn't sound like we're getting any feedback like that around the table today, so.
The next item, simple item, signs, temporary signs. We've received input from the Penmar Association of Realtors, and they made another number of recommendations for tweaking of what was proposed so that it would be able to accommodate the types of signs that they have to have on a property when it's for sale. And those, I think the commission felt that those, what they were suggesting was doable and would still be consistent with what we're trying to do to be Gilbert compliant with about temporary signs. Then we heard from the Washington County Republican Central Committee, and the feeling there was there should be no limitation whatsoever, ever. Should be able to have just as many political signs as you want, ever, on any property. And there's no way to accommodate that and still be Gilbert compliant, because that's a content issue, and you have to be content neutral to be consistent with this new Supreme Court ruling about signs. And so what the Planning Commission is recommending is that we take the signs out of this package. And basically, we're punting at this point, figuring out how can we make everybody happy, which seems impossible. But we don't want the 2018 Land Management Code package, which is now March of 2019, to drag any further, to be able to let that move forward. And so the recommendation is to pull the signs from this right now, and we'll just keep plugging and trying to figure out how we could craft something that would keep everybody happy, but still not run afoul of the Supreme Court decision regarding temporary signs and being content neutral.
Good idea.
Is that acceptable?
I'd love to keep talking about it.
I bet, yes, so would we.
Yes, I can't wait.
Maybe there'll be another Supreme Court case that'll solve it all for us.
Yes. Like, oh, this was the answer.
Yeah. And then the fifth one, the request from a developer would be to allow housing in mixed-use buildings or mixed-use development in the CR district. This was, came up during the public review input. I think it was an email that we received. The Planning Commission's feeling is that we should leave the commercial regional zoning district as is right now. Currently, you can't do housing in that zone unless you go through a planned unit development overlay. But we are recommending that we pull the proposed PUD amendment from the package to allow staff to reevaluate our PUD standards to bring them up to modern development standards, because we heard from another developer who was aware we're proposing to make it so that you have to have a minimum of a 20-acre tract rather than a minimum of a 5-acre tract to do a PUD. So they were showing us something, trying to get in under the wire, and it wasn't working for the code, probably isn't really working for them either.
Wasn't even really good design either.
So we said, why don't we just pull what we're proposing so no one's trying to get in under the radar or under the wire, and then we'll take a look at it, see how other people are handling this desire to mix residential and commercial in a town center kind of a design, and then come back with some, just because we haven't really taken a complete look at the PUD probably since it was put in here in, I don't know if it was the 80s that it was put into the code. And so that's the recommendation. And it doesn't matter to the developer we talked to. They are in no real rush. They were just rushing because of us. But if we're no longer rushing, neither will they.
And it's interesting that we've actually gotten several overtures on several properties around the city just within the last 3 or 4 months about potential PUD developments. Whereas before, I've been zoning administrator here for 16 years and we haven't had one. Now all of a sudden we've had 3 or 4 properties that people are asking serious questions about potentially for doing PUDs, and so.
Shows where land values are going.
Mm-hmm. And then the last item was, I don't know if this one was particularly remanded back by the council, but it was input we received during the hearing process, was to ensure there's maximum flexibility in the zoning code for housing opportunities throughout the city for elderly populations and people facing homelessness. And the Planning Commission's recommendation is that they believe with the existing zoning provisions and the proposed new provisions for rooming houses and group homes, that the city's zoning code will provide adequate flexibility for housing opportunities in the city.
We're not talking about tiny houses, right?
Elderly.
So those are the recommendations from the Planning Commission on those remanded items.
Actually, we have provisions that are currently pending that would make the minimum square footage requirements for a dwelling unit standard across the city, the ones that we currently have in place in the downtown, and it would kick out most tiny houses, so,
It'd have to be at least 500 square feet.
yeah.
which is the smallest an apartment unit can be in the downtown. A new apartment unit. So, next steps would be for the, at some point, whether that's tonight or another night, Mayor and Council to finish up on the 2018 package, and then once we know where the council wants to go with it, then staff is gonna need a few weeks to get this thing into ordinance-ready format. So we were thinking the soonest it could be before you for any kind of action would be the end of April. But it would be good to get your direction on these items that seem to be still slightly up in the air.
I'm okay with it.
Been on the front lines.
Yeah.
And then we'll be back in 2020.
So should we come back for another work session? Or move ahead with these
Are you okay
recommendations?
with it?
Did you want to discuss rooming houses anymore?
No,
You're good.
That's fine.
I think we're good.
All right, tied to the next item here.
Okay. We'll need a little bit of time to do the surgery of the ordinance, because keep in mind, we have a whole package of stuff that didn't get discussed today that's gonna be going in, and it's gonna take us a little while to get that surgery done, so we have a camera-ready product for you to adopt.
Thank you. I know it's been long and arduous process. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's always fun.
Yes.
All right, up next we have chief requests for exception to city water and wastewater. Joe and Nancy.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So our request is under the water and wastewater policy for an economic development project, which is exception number 6. The request came in from Chief for Airport Business Park. They've sold approximately 3 acres to Ganesh 3 LLC for the construction of a 100-room hotel. The project is about 42,000 square foot hotel that has an estimated investment of 6.5 to 9 million and the creation of 10 new jobs. The owners of Ganesh 3 LLC are Bharat and Raj Patel, and construction is expected to begin sometime this spring. The property is serviced by Washington County for wastewater sewer service, so the request is simply for water. Through our procedure, we assemble the recommendation from the Board of County Commissioners as a part of the process, and that letter of support from the county commissioners is included in the packet. And also, the recommendation from myself and from Nancy is this presentation of this memo. The approval would require a pre-annexation agreement, and we've also identified 2 contingencies: that pre-annexation agreement as one, and second, receiving a copy of a recorded plat that vacates a 1991 preliminary final plat for Lot 2 of the property lines and subdivides the new Lot 2. So we found that there was that necessary cleanup item that we will make as a contingency. Included in your packet is a map that's labeled Proposed Hotel Airport Site and Surrounding Area. This shows the medium range growth boundary as the blue line, and the proposed hotel site as the yellow outlined line. The next map was provided by Frederick Cyber Associates. This shows 2 phases of a project. We're only talking about the hotel, which is on the left side. The drawing also shows a potential future convention center, but that is not part of the request today. If you are in support of the recommendation, we would bring this back as a motion at the February 26th meeting. I'll let Nancy add any additional comments.
The only comment I have is that it is consistent with our policy, and to that extent, I would, I would recommend that approval.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm sorry, March.
fortunately, I was around when we wrote our initial list of items that have ballooned, into basically extending service for any reason it appears, folks that want to develop outside of the area we're supposed to serve can come up with, and get away from, the annexation process directly, to the degree possible in doing so. But when I read number 6 and I recall our discussion, back in that time, when the county had sued us, and, we rightfully said, we can require annexation as part of the extension of city services, including our utilities. There was significant discussion of the impact that decision would ultimately have on areas like the Hopewell Valley sort of, corridor for your industrial, your warehouse, manufacturer, shipping area that had been developed for those economic opportunities, and the airport, for its obvious expansion, for its economic development and job creation opportunities. And I'm trying to figure out how in this process we could define a hotel, and I get it if you want to just say it's an economic development project, but when we talked about, there's a reason we put the word vital in there back in those early times when we developed this policy, and the exceptions to it was because we wanted to make it clear that, the city wanted it to be important for the extension of city services in the areas that we had not determined that number one, we wanted to, or number two, had the capacity to do. And this isn't just outside of the MR, of the medium range growth area. It's on the entire opposite side of the airport. It's outside of the airport zone. And it's basically just a hotel being built, at the upper extreme point of the county, just this side of the Pennsylvania state line, for the purposes of a hotel. I guess I'm trying to figure out number one, what's vital in here that would say, yes, we should extend our services outside of the medium range growth area for this very individual, it's not retail, and it's not industrial, which is, which I get, but it's also not vital. Would we be having the same conversation if it was, I don't know, some type of service-oriented convenience center? And I hate to point out sort of the elephant in the room here, but we just got done a discussion where we said, and our planning commission chair pointed out, we struggle with, the operations of some of the hotels and the ability, to retain and attract customer base, one of which is exactly an area we're talking about for rooming houses. And I'm just gonna lay it out real flat. So somehow we're able to invest $6 to $9 million out there, as long as the city extends its services, its utilities, for it to happen out there, but it's not worth happening here in our downtown, right along the dual highway, from effectively the very same owners. I just have some difficulty with that, and I sit here and I stare straight up the street from that, and there's been half a dozen different iterations and discussions of possible convention centers, at the Venice area and venues along dual highway, and we're gonna say, what, no. We should go way out here, well beyond the area we've determined, not even as the suburban fringes, but beyond the suburban fringes, and we're gonna send our water out there and our services and utilities, and to something that clearly isn't vital. If it was that vital, it'd be happening somewhere down here, and they wouldn't have to come in for this request. I don't see where it meets it, and I think that if that's what we wanna do, then we might as well just keep saying, what we wanna do with our utilities is extend them to the outside of the donut while the rest of it continues to be vacated in the center. And we're left with that hole. And there's nothing good about that for this community, nothing at all.
I mean, do we know anything about the hotel? Is it going to be a chain hotel? Is it going to be another state line motel? I mean, do we know anything?
We believe it'll carry a flagship name. It may be a flagship name like La Quinta or similar to that brand, is what I've heard discussed, but I don't have full confirmation of that.
I agree with you, Kristen.
And I'm a little, this proposed conference, I'm sorry, were you
Yeah.
done?
No, I mean,
Yeah, that's very
you know,
sort of shocking, I didn't know.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we
Where'd
sit
that
here
come
at this
from?
goal, and that was part of our, this whole study that we did, and we sit here and talk about, are we gonna look into a conference center, and here's
I think
a
it's one of the 8 items
30,000
listed in
square
our
foot
urban-
one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, in our urban
This is just another
plan.
example of a disconnect. Like,
Right.
why are we not working together?
And while
From the
sure,
from the staff level position, when we work with economic development, and we've done it for many years, almost all of them consider every project vital because of what it can provide as a feeder service for other locations to fill in with accessory facilities for that same area. So for us, we feel bound to bring it to the mayor council for discussion. We put our stamp on it too, so that it gets this far. And this is the discussion that we need to have with this body for what direction you need for us to go. But we feel pretty much bound to bring it here, for discussion
I
with
guess
all of us.
I'm just kind of curious, and when you point out, why wouldn't the convention center ask for it first? I have to think in my mind that there was some strategic, political thought process to that. Absent an understanding of why you would only ask for one at this singular moment when you know you've laid out. I mean, you got parking laid out, you got the size of the building, the shape of it.
I mean,
I mean,
it's
clearly
in the
this
letter
wasn't
from
something
Jackson
somebody
Hook.
drew on a napkin.
yeah, clarify on that is, I believe only the hotel is a project. I think the convention center is an idea and a concept, but I'm not aware that the convention.
Until the utility's approved. Once that gets extended, it's
To
gonna be
your
real
point,
hard
for
for
sure.
this body to sit here and say, nah, we did it
not
for
this.
one, but we don't believe the other one is.
But it is the reason we only went with supplying water services to one of the properties, not extending it to the other. That's one of the
Yeah, right.
provisions that we made sure were carried in there, so that we did stop it at this one. It would have to come back to the mayor council for discussion and approval once again if a request was made.
And our process is to bring them forward on a project-by-project basis, not,
And I will say
not
again,
to give a request for an entire area of the airport, for
just
example.
like we just had the approval for the one down in the southern part of the outside of the medium-range growth area, for the county, the Sharpsburg Pike Training Center. So we made an exception, we added exception, I think number 10 in here, right, to make that happen. And it's outside of the MRGA. And I said at that time, if this is the direction we're going to take, the city can't fairly say, within our comp plan, we've defined our growth area that we believe we can, credibly serve with our projected utility capability, this area. And then within the span of a month, we now have 2 more places outside of that, and then say, we'll make adjustments to the MRGA when we get to the point that we run out and we haven't served the area inside of the MRGA, and now we're out of utility. I mean, there's only a finite amount of water and a finite amount of sewer capacity that this city can create or accept. And once we reach that, then we gotta go back to the drawing board and spend some money and get state and federal approvals, if it's even possible, to expand that capability. But we've said, over the next 20 years, here's what we believe we can serve. And in the last month, we've said, we're gonna go ahead and serve 2 places, or we've had requests to serve 2 places outside of that. If we're gonna make that decision, then we've gotta come back to that boundary line and say, okay, if we're pushing it in this direction, we're gonna have to pull it back in some manner, in the other boundary areas and say, sorry, we got a request out this way. We're gonna send the water out here, So now we gotta pull this boundary over here in a little bit, because we, you know, that finite amount's sort of like the air in a balloon. You push in one area or push out another, you know, it only has so much in it.
Well, I mean, I thought the way things were structured, I know we have pre-annexation agreements and everything, but we don't put our water in unless we annex that property outside of the city.
In other words, this is the city, this is the MRGA we've said we can serve. Now you got this place out here and this place out here, because we already have water lines running like this, that say, we want it way out here because, you know, because the line's already out here and we want to hook on. Well, you know, we've only said we have enough to serve this area, right? We're this big, we're serving this much, and if we serve all these places out here like this, 20 years from now, we're not gonna have enough to fill out the rest of the requests that are inside of that circle, right?
Over 50% of our customers are outside municipal limits, and of course, the water service, and, you know, outside municipal limits would mean they're not annexed in, so.
But we've already defined a really big area
Yeah.
and said, here's what we think we can accommodate
The
based on
projected
our
growth,
projected
not the
water
full
and
filled
sewer.
out, but the projected growth that we might see over the next 20 years. We felt that that boundary was realistic.
Which then ties to our, how we structure meeting it with our projected water and sewer capabilities. How much flow we can take in, how much water we can produce and send out, the pressurization across the system, you know, like they talk about in the East End and the West End and places like that. And, you know, you got these requests, and the unfortunate part is on the utility side, you know, 50 years ago, we ran lines from basically the north end of the county, you know, to the south end of the county, you know, because of requests, because, you know, because of political decisions. And folks in these areas on these lines that go way outside of where we, you know, sort of decided to build out to, want on the lines now. And that's fine, as long as you don't sit here and say, here's where we plan to grow, and then you decide to grow everywhere else.
I just looked up the owner's name out of curiosity, because there was an article about this back from November, and the two gentlemen, of course, we are familiar with Raj, but the other gentleman currently owns State Line Inn and State Line Motel. I mean, I have concerns with that right away. So we have those two, the Garden Plaza, which has gotten somewhat better. I mean, do we really want another State Line Motel? That would be my fear.
Well, I think the overriding issue is not about a specific business, or do we want a specific business there or not. I think the overriding issue is what the point Kristen's making about how do we want to expand our water and sewer service? And do we want to continue to honor these requests to go outside the area we've defined as where we're going to build?
And, you know, and generally when we came up with that, we recognized when we did that, right? That we said, oh, you know what? You know, the airport's way out here, and we've said that's a big engine for this county. And we said, and Hopewell's out here, and that's a big engine for this county. And as much as we may disagree as city and county political bodies in the heat of the moment, we gotta make these happen. And so if you were to tell me, hey, you know, I got this building across the street, I don't think it has the Mayflower on it, I don't know what it, I've been out there, well, but if you'd have told me, hey, that's gonna, you know, we need service there, you know, behind that to an undeveloped piece of property, it's gonna generate 100 jobs. The impetus was, in that political discussion in that moment was said, okay, we need to structure this so we can make these projects happen. You know, these are big projects in an area we said is a big engine for the county, and we cannot stifle that. I don't see, I mean, this just happens to be in the proximity to the airport.
That
We probably
defines
wouldn't
vital
even be
for
having, yeah, we probably wouldn't be having the conversation, you know, if it was out here, you know, towards Cave Town. I mean, right? Because you'd say, no, you know, that wasn't the purpose of that. Or over here in Hopewell Valley, we said, you know, we realize we've got to serve that engine, you know, because it's
And Friendship Technology.
It's a job
Park.
metric,
We were-
right.
We were looking at those kind of areas.
And all I'm saying, I think that's sort of why we put that word vital in there, and we defined that sort of commercial or non-residential type growth outside of an area we've said we'd serve, which is way bigger, you know, than our UGA, service area, already, to serve those areas. Because you really got three lines, you got the city line, the UGA line, right, and the MRGA.
Yes.
I appreciate the discussion. A question would be from a process standpoint, does this need to move forward and for there to be a vote, or does it not move forward because there isn't consensus? Because a request was received from a outside group from chief. That's more of a process question.
I think it requires a vote of the council, that's my opinion.
Since we've already brought forth and give the consensus of EDC and of the utilities, I think we would have to go ahead with a motion and bring it up for a full council vote.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
And Jill, I just want to make sure, on the June 4th or the June 4th letter from Chief, it indicates the hotel will provide employment for 10 people and the convention center will ultimately employ 20. And then the second sentence says, secure water service for these uses and lots. So are they asking for both?
No, I mean, you
Okay.
can look at the date sequence, that we've been working on this since
I know.
June. And we most recently received the final information in order to bring it forward to you. So it has been a lengthy process in gathering the information that we needed to bring this forward to you. And I'm certain that the request is for the single site identified in the in the map.
Oh, in the map, okay.
Right, which is only the hotel project.
And if the mayor and council are in favor or not in favor, it would be good to have some justification language for the motion, since this is kind of a test, these vital economic development projects, and it helps people understand in the future what you're looking at.
Right. And going forward, any further direction on the definition of vital, that's where I very much appreciate the conversation today, for us to understand, do you want at a staff level for that determination before bringing them forward, or bring all requests forward to you? So those are process questions that would be helpful.
And I don't think when we originally set that up, that we wanted the definition, you know what I mean? Because I think the goal in those discussions, you know, way back in 2006 or whatever it was, you know, we want to try and approve everything that we can possibly approve, you know, that meets the merits of the annexation policy and the exceptions to it, and that, you know, it was a living sort of, you know, movable document. But vital, you know, for me, I think, back in those discussions, you know, you needed to have some tie-in to, you know, one of these couple of sort of county economic engine areas that, you know, I thought that in this presentation from the applicant, that they were gonna somehow tie the necessity of the hotel to some, you know, I thought the county would tie to some overwhelming need that they're experiencing for hotel space, you know, bed space out at the airport because of activity there. I thought that's what would be sort of some of an argument that would come in. But I mean, it's completely absent of any of that. Like, I thought in this process it'd be the applicant's sort of job to explain why they feel it's vital. I think that's such a critical word, you know, when we develop that.
And I think we need to come up with a little bit better, a document of understanding or something, a way for developers in the future to understand what our intent is with regard to build out of water and sewer services, just so that they don't assume that by requesting that, you know, I'm near a water line, I'm gonna request it, and of course they'll hook up.
I think for the language in the exemption, right now, it puts staff at a little bit of a disadvantage, because if we denied it at the staff level, if someone really wanted to move forward with the project, there's no appeal process in there. They want to get it to mayor council to plead their case, so we may need to do something in the exemption language to kind of alleviate that from staff and have them come directly to here.
I agree with you very much on that.
Can you just delineate here quick, briefly where the line is now?
The water line goes almost to, I don't have the
Mason-Dixon
map.
Road, almost to Mason-Dixon.
Almost to the Mason-Dixon line. It
Up
serves
City
all the
Corps
way
Drive,
around.
yeah.
There's not a whole lot of a main extension that would be required to serve this property. There is a main extension, but it's almost there.
So as part of this project, they'd loop it back into 11, or is the loop already created?
The
No,
loop-
the loop would be created in doing this.
Yeah, and I understand the importance of that. That's why I said for me, it's the applicants, the onus on the applicant to make,
Make the case for vital.
Yeah.
Understood.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So do we need a definition though from the county too, in terms of what is vital? I mean, why is this property valuable or vital to the county from an economic development standpoint?
I have them flesh out the request when it initially comes through the county EDC, with their statement of why it's vital to the county for us to act on that.
And that would give us some more information. I mean, if there is a multi-year plan for some massive build-out in that area for something, then that would give us a little more information to go.
So would, from the discussion from Councilmember Alishar and others, do you want us to bring the applicant in for a further discussion before we bring it to a vote to the council, or are you okay with what we've discussed here tonight and moving forward then with the regular session motion?
I mean, for me, I'm ready to make a decision, because I feel like I don't feel like we, you talk about definitions, I have a map here that says airport zone, that's drawn, not
Understood.
including that. And like you said, if there's a county plan for what, if the airport zone is bigger than that, then
That we need to know
define
about
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, define it for us and show us, why it should be expanded. And that should be some of those 2+2 party conversations to say, hey, we want to bring to the table this idea to expand the zone because developments happen. Clearly, there's been more development out there since 2006 when we wrote this, when we drew up these lines, so, maybe we need to update the lines. Things like that, I think, should happen.
Yeah.
Rather than us just saying yes to something that seems like a very sort of individual request, and the unknowns of what are you really requesting it for? Because I got a letter here saying one thing and an application saying another.
We'll schedule your 2x2 next week.
Yep. Good.
And then we'll have it
That's a great
prepared
topic for
for a
that
motion
conversation.
then on the 26th for the council. Understood. Thank you.
All right, city administrator comments?
Saturday, March 16th, the St. Patrick Run Fest, 5K, 8K, and half marathon. There will be some street closures downtown beginning at 8:30, so if you plan on coming downtown for the event, which is a very worthwhile event to see, make sure you're there early. Visit our shops and restaurants when we're finished, so we should have a good crowd downtown. And again, we've had some discussion this week in regard to the urban improvement project. We do appreciate everyone's input. It is a major undertaking. When it is finished, everyone will be very glad and happy with what we've completed. So we appreciate your patience at the moment, and that's it for me.
Councilmember McIntyre?
So something interesting, I spoke and did a presentation at the sociology class at HCC this past, I guess yesterday. And the professor had asked the students why they don't come downtown. And you know, we're talking about 18, 19-year-old kids, I suppose. And you know what their answer was? Crime. That's what these 18 or 19-year-olds that don't read the paper, that probably aren't on Facebook, that don't see what's going on in Hagerstown, that essentially probably hear from their parents or grandparents that it's unsafe. So you know, in follow-up to that, we have received 5 applications for the Youth Advisory Council. I am extremely excited to prove that downtown is safe, but the other things that they didn't know, they didn't know where the Flying Camel was. They had no idea, which would be perfect for their, you know, age group. They didn't know about the Summer Slide Festival. They had no idea about the farmer's market. So it's really interesting that, and there were probably, I would say, 20% of them lived within the city limits. I just found that kind of unfortunate that, you know, they are answering with the word crime, and in my opinion, probably have no idea. So, I don't know. It's a good thing that there's 5 applicants for the Youth Advisory Council. I'm hoping to hear those voices as to how to change that perception, or, you know, do they have creative ways to get the word out to get people downtown? So there is some hope in my comment, but I found it very unfortunate that young kids use that answer. That's it.
Nothing tonight.
I don't have anything.
Just to piggyback off of that, I think that goes into what we've all been talking about for several months now. And now that we're through the state of the city, hopefully we can focus on a marketing plan for Hagerstown. Because if people that live here don't know where the farmer's market is, or don't know that we have a Summer Slide Festival, or don't know where the Flying Camel is, I don't think we are doing our job as a city to spread the positive word about the good things that we have here. So I know we made that one of our goals, and I think we need to do that sooner than later, for sure. Because that is definitely alarming, and people who live here don't know what that is.
Well, and the fact that Amy, you know, sent about 300 invitations to things to do, and, you know, there's a lot going on, you know?
Yeah. All right, that's it.
Like,
push my gavel?
stop it.